for a tech talk on real-time threat analysis, visualization, and incident response. We have with us Imad Hafar, the Director, Security Consultant Team, Meta Kaspersky UAE. Imad is an experienced information security professional with a demonstrated track record working in the domain of cybersecurity. He's been working in cybersecurity for more than 12 years with 18 years of total experience in information technology. So now it's time, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome Imad on the stage. Over to you, Imad.
Thank you, Bhavana. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Could we have your video by any chance? Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. So I think I've lost your voice, but I'm going to go on anyways. Very good morning, everyone. Appreciate being here and taking time in my session today. So the topic I'll be covering today is the topic of cyber threat intelligence. But we will be tackling that subject from a bit of a different perspective. Essentially, we'll look into how we can use cyber threat intelligence to optimize threat analysis, incident response, and even threat hunting, and how Kaspersky can essentially help you achieve that journey in a more streamlined and easy manner. Now, over the past few years, whenever I talk to my clients, one of the constant questions usually is what threat intelligence is all about. How can we know if we need it or not? How we can get it from, or where we can get it from, how we can use it, and so on. Now, obviously, the question over the years changed, and recently, organizations now are talking about optimizing the use of threat intelligence and how to make the most out of it. And essentially, this is what I'll try to cover in the coming 15 minutes, briefly, of course. Now, usually what I advise my clients is to look at the cyber threat intelligence from a specific perspective, which will help them to understand whether or not they need it, in which manner, at which frequency, and how to use it. And that perspective usually is the, the decision-making mechanism. Now, when you look at or when you look at cyber threat intelligence from that perspective, you obviously can channel the threat intelligence into three main streams: the strategic, tactical, and operational. And obviously, depending on the organization, what their objectives are, what they're trying to achieve with cyber threat intelligence, that will guide which of the three categories, if I can say, of threat intelligence they need to consume in their environment. Now, usually some of the CTI will overlap among the different decision-making streams, but nevertheless, for those organizations looking to achieve long-term, obviously strategic changes or objective to their cybersecurity posture, the set of CTI would be a bit different than those looking to achieve goals at the tactical and operational level. On a strategic level, we talk about things like being able to know your opponents, what their capabilities are, what are their motivation, what could motivate them in the future, and what might turn a neutral threat actor, in some sense, a threat to my organization. Now, the tactical and operational, as you might imagine, you need to have different set of intel that would help you to achieve certain steps at a lower level, not necessarily strategic, and understand different set of information. Things like being able to understand what are the tactic techniques and procedures being exploited in the wild, what are the new emerging threat actors, what are their motivation, what are their specific attack vectors, what could be the mitigation techniques that we need to adopt into the organization. And similarly, on the operational level, we talk about very specific actions that are taken in real time to address specific threats that are imminent to the organization. Now, usually, even from that perspective, one of the challenges that organization would face is the frequency at which threat intel change, and that's entirely true, but it all depends on how we categorize and look at threat intelligence again. Now, one of the ways that we usually use in our approach is to look at threat intel from an approach called pyramid of pain. Probably you're already aware of it, but essentially this approach looks at threat intel and their content from the intel availability perspective and lifetime. So in other words, it looks at how widely available the intel sources for that specific category, and at the same time, how easily it is to be manipulated by the threat actors. So if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, which is the hash values, for example, whereas, I mean, while this is a very valuable set of information that gives usually 100% confirmation of a sample being malicious or not, the frequency at which the malicious samples are changing is quite daunting. We alone at Kaspersky see more than 350,000 unique malicious sample every single day. And the fact of the matter is, overcoming these intel is very easy for the opponents, for the adversaries, because for them, it's technically rather simple to generate a new sample that has exactly the same malicious content, whereas it has a different hash value, which render our intel rather useless. Now, the same goes for all the other categories. IP address, it talks about the infrastructure that the threat actor use, and this is also rather big category, still relatively easy to be manipulated and changed. So usually when threat actors know that we know about their infrastructure, it's only a matter of probably hours, if not less, before they are able to change the infrastructure and move into a completely new infrastructure to carry out their attacks. Now, the more we move towards the top of the pyramid, obviously categories get smaller because the set of intel in that category gets less. And at the same time, the lifespan of that intel becomes bigger because the adversary's ability to manipulate this intel becomes more and more tougher for them. At the top of the pyramid, we see the TTP, which is the tactic, technique, and procedure. And basically in there, we describe behavior rather than describing solid artifact. And obviously, unless we are up against a state-sponsored threat actor, coming up with a new TTP is not a simple task at all. So most probably, majority of the threat actors, they will be using one of the non-TTPs. And as such, the lifespan of that intel becomes longer and brings higher value to the organization. Now, obviously, using this categorization of the intel, it becomes very clear that when you use any framework to construct your threat hunting activity, incident response, or even your cyber security controls in general, you will be able to move from, in this example, I'm using the attack framework, which is quite comprehensive, but anyone who had used it, they would know immediately that it's quite daunting to keep up with all the techniques and all the tactics that are included within this framework. Now, using the right intel, you can turn the framework into something more manageable, something that would construct a set of steps and stages for the attack, the specific techniques that you need to pay attention to, that you need to be looking out for, what kind of controls you have at the moment to cover that specific technique, and whether or not you need to focus your attention on that particular area. One thing in common, I believe, that we all have is the short amount of resources when it comes to cybersecurity. And obviously, threat intelligence or cyber threat intelligence, one of its value proposition is to help us to optimize the allocation of resources and optimize the way we perform a task related to cybersecurity. So with this in mind, as you can see, we can, or you can, utilize the threat intel at the right time, in the right place, to change the, again, any guideline, any framework you might use at the moment from something quite vague, I would say, into something more specific that guides you where you need to focus your attention and where to allocate your resources. Now, one of the also benefits of threat intel, the fact that it is quite modular. It's quite easy to build a package that would include the intel that you specifically need for your requirements, and use it in the manner you think most appropriate for your organization. But it doesn't stop there, because just having the intel itself isn't the end of the story. Obviously, the more detailed, the more actionable, the more machine readable and human readable the intel is, the more value it can bring to the IR, incident response, and the threat hunters in your organization. And this is one of the things that we do with our threat intel, that we run an extensive enrichment process to feed and build our intelligence with contextual data that would allow you to draw a complete picture for any attack, so to speak. So in essence, instead of just saying that a specific artifact should be treated as malicious, which might be a very good piece of intel, but as long as you can incorporate some supporting information into that piece of intel, which obviously, again, would help you to optimize your resources to understand if this alert coming from that piece of intel should be treated as an urgent or something that can wait a little bit until an urgent one being treated. So this is the kind of information that, at least for us, we would include into the threat data feeds and the intelligence that we push to our client. We will help you categorize or prioritize your task using threat score for all the entries. We will help you to construct a timeline for the intel. So just because it's there in the intel database or source, it doesn't mean necessarily at this second, at this moment, that it is malicious. So that's why we incorporate the timeline, which help you to understand when the threat or malicious activity started and ended for that particular piece of intel. Now, on the other hand, this obviously would help you to visualize and have better understanding how the stream of activities in the organization running, how the threat intel consumed by the organization are distributed, what value they bring into the organization, and whether or not they are needed. Because in many occasions, I've seen a lot of entities, they're already consuming threat intel, but large part of it doesn't bring the value they were hoping for. Sometimes because the use wasn't optimized to the level at which the intel can or could help them. Sometimes simply because they didn't need that set of intel, and they would be better off using another set of intel based on their organization and their vision, with the tools they have at the moment, and what they are looking to achieve with the threat intelligence. Now, obviously, of course, providing the incident response and threat hunter teams rich amount of information is very valuable when it comes to analyzing and understanding the threat actors they're up against. Having artifacts collected from incident response definitely would need to be investigated and a larger set of intel need to be constructed and derived from that piece of artifact. And this is another thing which we do with our client extensively. We provide them with a global vision of the threats happening in the world, and we give them the ability to be to in some sense create their own intelligence from whatever artifacts they might have at the moment, artifacts that they have collected probably from their own environment, but they seek to expand their vision, expand their knowledge, and understand further what that piece of artifact means for them. Of course, this is all comes into action because of our global research and analysis team. This is our elite team of security researchers that carry for us the security research, cybersecurity research globally. Part of the team, 3 members of the team actually at the moment, they reside in the region, in the Middle East, and they speak our language. And they had helped us to identify a number of threat actors that were in some occasions generated from the Middle East or targeting the Middle East in specific. So the input from this team is very valuable to us, and this is at least one source of information which we use extensively to build the threat intel database, which we finally, of course, provide to our clients. Now, at the same time, one of the value propositions as well is the amount of data that you can extract from a single piece of information. So in other words, again, of the incident response, if the incident response team had certain artifact that they extracted from the environment, be it a hash, a URL, an IP, and they suspect that this is the piece of artifact that generated the incident, they can use our tools to expand their vision and to generate or understand all the other, what are the other piece of codes, URLs, IPs that are linked to that piece of artifact, and how they interact with each other. Were that file discovered in the environment communicating with certain URLs on the internet? Were there any other malicious files downloaded or usually downloaded from that resource? And obviously, this will construct the steps of your threat hunting activity, because from that point, you can, for example, extract a list of malicious hashes that are known to be downloaded from the resource you're looking for, and then scan the environment for these hashes, because chances are seeing a connection to that URL obviously means that those artifacts had already been downloaded, or files had already been downloaded into the environment. And also, one of the things that we do with our client is provide them with the intelligence reports, which help them on a strategic and operational level. These reports, usually they provide them information related to threat actors, their activities, and what kind of malicious activities we're observing in the region, in their territory, in their vertical, in their industry, and of course, what are the tools, the TTPs, the IOCs related with that attack or threat actor. Even we can provide, in certain cases, of course, further details and further insights into the operation of the threat actor, and what they specifically been trying to do or trying to achieve, their CNC infrastructure, and so on. Finally, even for those organizations at the, I can say, high maturity level in threat hunting and incident response, they can use their own generated internal intelligence to generate their own set of intel that they can use later on to identify potential adversaries. One of the tools that we use in that regard called the threat attribution engine, and in it we feed DNA record in some sense of known threat actors that we have accumulated over the past 20 years. And then they can inject any sample into that engine, and the engine would compare the DNA record of the two samples, and then attribute the similarity between the sample and the DNA record in the database. So from that perspective, you will get to even understand if this new unknown sample, which was identified somewhere in the infrastructure, if it relates or look like, or in some sense connected to a known threat actor. Who is that threat actor, and what are the associated IOCs or intelligence for that threat actor, which obviously again would help you to direct your effort in that, or put your effort rather in that direction. So that's all what I think the time allows me to cover today. But nevertheless, we are around. I'm around all day long. I have my colleagues as well here in the event. So if any of what I said rings a bell with you, if you're interested in discussing your current and future plans for cyber threat intelligence, we'll be more than happy to talk to you and discuss all the options and possibilities we can achieve together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Imad, for joining us today.